Welcome to a forum with candidates running for the Democratic nomination to the State Senate, 5th Middlesex District, sponsored by the League of Women Voters of Winchester and the League of Women Voters of Melrose. My name is Lynn Brodsky. It is my pleasure to represent our local Leagues of Women Voters as we bring you this event. We thank Stoneham Town Hall and Stoneham TV for working with us to make this happen. This is being streamed by Stoneham TV, recorded for later viewing on the Stoneham TV website. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan organization with a mission to promote informed participation by all eligible voters and public understanding of major policy issues. We do not support or oppose any candidates or political parties. We do study and take positions about major policy issues and some ballot questions. We are organized at the national, state, and local levels. Our policy positions and activities can be reviewed on the respective websites. If this forum and our mission meet your needs or even inspire you, we encourage you to donate or become a member. All people may join. Massachusetts State Senate terms are 2 years with no limit on the number of terms one person may serve. The 5th Middlesex State Senate District includes Malden, Melrose, Reading, Stoneham, Wakefield, and part of Winchester. The incumbent state senator, Jason Lewis, is not running for re-election. The 3 candidates running are State Representative Kate Lipper-Garabedian, Malden City Councilor Kerry McDonald, and Malden City Councilor Ryan O'Malley. Today's candidate forum will be moderated by Margaret Copey. Margaret is a trained league moderator and a member of the League of Women Voters of Lexington.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Lynn. The rules for this forum are as follows. Each candidate will have up to 2 minutes for an opening statement. The order of speaking was determined ahead of time by random method. After that, I will ask the candidates a series of prepared questions in rotating order. There will be some yes and no questions. The others will be 90 seconds. These short form questions will be followed by a related question for which each candidate will have up to 90 seconds. Personal references about other candidates or people are out of order. After our final question, each candidate will have up to 2 minutes for a closing statement. The closing statements can include rebuttals the candidates may wish to offer. The closing statements will be given in the reversed order of the opening statements. Our timekeepers are seated in clear view. Could you hold your cards up, please? They will hold up a yellow placard and a yellow placard with 30 seconds or left, and a red placard when it's time to stop. So now we will go to the opening statements, up to 2 minutes each. The order of presentation will be Councilor Kerry McDonald, Councilor Ryan O'Malley, and Representative Kate Lipper-Garabedian. So we will start with Councilor Kerry McDonald. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here with you all. I'm Kerry McDonald. I am a 3-term Malden City Councilor at large. I'm a working parent and a nonprofit executive with the Unitarian Universalist Association. And as we talk to voters across the district, what we hear is a desire for urgency and people who will fight for us and for our communities. And so that's why I'm running. I'm running first to fight the Trump administration, who is targeting our communities, our industries, our rights, and our neighbors. And I am the only candidate in this race who has sued the Trump administration. That is the fight that I will take to the State House to help end our contracts with ICE and to make sure that our rights are guaranteed. I'm also going to fight to fund our communities. As chair of the Finance Committee in Malden, I know how hard it is to fund our schools and our services, and we can fix the local budget crisis. We're going to fight to make life more affordable, from utility bills and housing and health care and child care. And we're going to fight for a legislature that respects the will of the voters, supports the legislative audit, and has open records and public meetings so that we can build trust in democracy. It's a time for fresh voices at our State House on Beacon Hill because so much is at stake in our communities right now. I am ready to fight for the things that matter in our communities, which have been a corridor of opportunity for generations. People have built families and lives, and that is the promise that we want to keep for our kids for the next generation, even when it can feel slipping away. I can't wait to talk more with my fellow candidates here about all the issues that impact this district, and really appreciate the League of Women Voters for hosting this forum for us today. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Ryan O'Malley.
I want to start by thanking the League of Women Voters of Winchester and Melrose for hosting this today. I am a product of Malden Public Schools, K through 12. Again, my name is Ryan O'Malley. I've been on the City Council for 11 years now. And the reason why I mentioned that I was a product of Malden Public Schools first is because my primary reason for running is to reform how we fund education in the Commonwealth. I believe it is not fair that zip codes dictate the quality of education, and as such, we need to fundamentally rethink how are we funding education. I approach it from two perspectives. The first is a municipal official in the city of Malden, as I mentioned. I've seen the impact of dwindling state aid on our communities. It forces cities and towns to do overrides, which are divisive even when they're necessary. You're pitting retirees and lower income people against families with children. It's just not how you strengthen the fabric of a community. In addition to my experience on the city council, from a more personal perspective, I'm a former Title I early reading intervention student. So because I had received the resources that I needed from dedicated union educators, I was able to get it back on track. I went to Holy Cross for undergrad, and I just recently graduated from BC Law, and I'm an affordable housing attorney by trade. I'm happy to have the Massachusetts Teachers Association endorsement. It means so much to have them on my side. In addition, I support government accountability, the audit of the legislature, the public records, as well as open meeting laws. We cannot just be holding one person accountable. We have to hold the federal government accountable, but it cannot just be holding one person accountable every 4 years. Lastly, protecting public assets is really important to me. I'm a former park ranger in the Middlesex Fells and Braycart, and so I've been protecting public assets for decades. So whether it's our parks, our schools, our libraries, or our public finances, it's essential that we do that so we have the resources available to educate our students and take care of our amazing public assets. I really appreciate your vote September 1st, o'malleysenate.com. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Kate Lippert-Garabedian.
Good afternoon. I'm Kate Lippert-Garabedian, and I'm here today to talk with you about my candidacy to be the next state senator for the 5th Middlesex District. I'm running because I know I have the right values, the right experience, and a track record of success at Beacon Hill to make a difference for you and your families every day that I go there as your next state senator. I'm a former public school teacher. I'm an education attorney. I'm the mother of 2 sons in the Melrose Public Schools. And for the last 6 years, I've represented 3 of the 6 communities in the 5th Middlesex District. And I'm proud of the track record of success that we've had there as a community, pushing for the things that we care about, whether that's pushing back on a chaotic and cruel Trump administration, standing up for reproductive health care rights, standing up for our immigrant friends and neighbors, standing up for the LGBTQ community, standing up for climate science. I have proudly championed these policies and seen success with them. I also know how challenging it is to be living here in Massachusetts. We're a very expensive state. Whether you're a young family like mine, trying to support young boys who are with growing appetites, or an older adult who's retiring and hoping to be able to remain in the community that they've loved for years to come. We have to lean in on those levers at the state level that make a difference for folks. That's why I was proud to support the comprehensive tax relief package that went through a couple years ago, to lean into investments in housing, to make good on our promise for the Student Opportunity Act and supporting public education. In the last 2 years alone, as a state representative, I brought back nearly $5.3 million in earmarks alone to the district that I serve. I do this with the work of so many supporters and friends. I'm proud to have the endorsements of outgoing State Senator Jason Lewis, the full legislative delegation, the largest coalition of organized labor, from public employees to healthcare workers to the building trades, the support of Reproductive Equity Now and Environmental League of Massachusetts, and I ask for your support as well and your vote on September 1st.
Thank you. I will now ask a series of questions that were prepared by the League of Women Voters of Winchester with extensive input from the public. The first question is a yes/no question. You have 5 seconds to answer. And you start with Councilor O'Malley. Do you support ballot question 7, which is on the November ballot, which would require all zoning districts to allow single-family homes on lots as small as 5,000 square feet with 50 feet of frontage?
Yes.
Okay, Representative Lippert-Garabedian.
Leaning yes.
And Councilor McDonald.
Yes.
Good. Okay, now the follow-up question, which will be a 90-second question. What would you do to reduce the financial burden on many people related to the high cost of housing? How would you balance increasing the supply of housing while respecting community input? And we start with the Representative Lipper Garabedian.
Yes, thank you for the question. You know, it is expensive, as I just said, to live in Massachusetts. So much of their paycheck is going to either rent or to mortgage. As part of the comprehensive tax legislation that we passed, I was really proud to push for and achieve a higher income tax deduction for renters, the first time that it happened in decades, and I was proud to support that. The ballot question goes to a really important part. There is no silver bullet. There is no one solution to the how expensive housing is and the fact that we have underinvested in production and keeping up with demand over the last several decades. So we need all hands on deck. That's why I lean toward yes on this question. I want to hear from other municipalities around the nation, around the Commonwealth, about their local context and what matters for them. But things like tenant right to purchase, making sure that ADUs are accessible, accessory dwelling units are by right, which we did in the Affordable Homes Act, which I supported. The single largest investment of state investment in housing in the history of the Commonwealth. Was glad to support that. There are many ways in which we can also look at other policy areas. So as former vice chair of elder affairs, I've looked closely at what does housing look like for our seniors. And one thing that we did in the bill that I helped draft was codify the concept of small house nursing homes to allow folks from all points of life to have options for their housing to be able to live with agency.
Thank you. Councilor McDonald, you have 90 seconds.
Housing is a human right, or it needs to be. And it's a cornerstone issue. If you don't have housing, you can't do anything else. You can't get to your job. You can't get well if you're sick. You can't keep your kids in school. You can't get the services you need if you are aging in place. So we need to take this on as the challenge that it is statewide. I do support the ballot initiative because I think that the best way to build the housing that we need is the way that we have done it in the past, which is housing that is often 2 and 3 families, that's more creative approaches like ADUs, cooperative housing. That's how generations have built wealth in the Commonwealth and in our communities. So I want to make it easier to do that and to eliminate the kinds of exclusionary rules that have been really designed to keep folks out of our communities. I think it's also really important to support affordable housing. So that's based on your income through community land trusts. By funding affordable housing, those projects take money, and so we need some new revenue sources for that. We'll probably talk about that. But those projects should be, when they come together, we should make it easy to do because they're the thing that everybody wants, not more luxury condos. We need housing that people can actually afford. And lastly, I would say we got to work better with our cities and towns about the impacts of housing. The MBTA Communities Bill, which I very much supported, was tough to comply with. So we need to talk about the impacts of building and be in a much better partnership. Communities deserve a seat at the table when their future is at stake.
Thank you. Councilor O'Malley?
Would you mind repeating the question?
Sure. What would you do to reduce the financial burden on many people related to the high cost of housing? How would you balance increasing the supply of housing while respecting community input?
That is a great question. So, one of the challenges that we face in our communities is that so many of the uses that we love about our communities that make them quaint New England towns are now pre-existing non-conforming. That means that they would no longer be allowed to be built. And so I think we really need to fundamentally look at what characteristics of our community make it nice and livable and walkable. And does our current zoning actually make that happen? Or are we forcing property owners to build things that make our communities less livable? Having rampant parking requirements that actually encourage cars rather than making communities more walkable. I was very happy and proud to support and introduce inclusionary zoning in Malden. That requires new properties to have a certain amount of affordable units and also helped support and create the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. So building affordable housing is also essential. As I mentioned, I'm an affordable housing attorney by trade, but we really need to make sure that we are building more housing in places that are convenient, so near mass transit, et cetera. The last thing I'll say is to make our communities affordable, I believe just getting rid of Prop 2.5 is dangerous. I don't think that we should have unrestricted property tax increases. It just makes our communities less and less affordable and pushes the problem farther and farther out.
Thank you. The next question is a 90-second question also. Moving on from housing, what legislative action do you favor to address other major contributors to the high costs of living in Massachusetts? And we'll start with Councilor McDonald. You have 90 seconds.
One thing I think we need to do more work on is the cost of childcare. Childcare is very expensive. It's the most expensive state in the country for childcare. And as anyone who's tried to put a kid in childcare knows, it's a huge barrier. It's a barrier to parents, especially women, being in the workforce. So what can we do to actually lower the costs? I want to propose that we make childcare a tax-exempt use. Childcares are often run as businesses. They're run out of people's homes. They might be run as centers. They're often run by immigrants, by women, and there's an opportunity there to actually lower the costs and make sure that we're all supporting childcare, that will do something to bring the cost down. Finding a place where you can host a childcare center is part of the problem. And the reality is that these costs are so high because of that, because of the cost of the building, the facility, as well as supplies. So I think we can do more to bring those costs down, to then increase the vouchers, which allow people who have more income challenges to be able to afford the childcare that's there, and work closely with these providers to make sure that they have what they need and can collaborate. I would love to see us work on some shared services that allow us to do purchasing across childcare centers that would, again, allow them to bring down the cost a little bit without penalizing the workers that take care of our kids who already are making minimum wage in many cases. So that's one thing I would love to see us do.
Thank you. Councilor O'Malley, 90 seconds.
I think that I'm a product of Malden Public Schools, but I actually had the opportunity to go to pre-K in Melrose at the Congregational Church. And, I believe that universal pre-K would be a great way to really approach this to help reduce the cost of childcare. I think that education is a cornerstone of my campaign, and starting education as early as possible not only helps the student succeed in life, but I think it also helps the families, be able to, return to the workforce if they would like to, and afford all of the increasing bills that we see in our state and our community. So I do support universal pre-K. I think it's something that we should be exploring. But there are other ways to save money that can help alleviate the cost of childcare. Utility bills are through the roof. And something that's a cornerstone of my campaign also is this affordability crisis that we're facing. We have a Department of Public Utilities that regulates utility rates, and I believe that we need to use our regulatory powers to cap utility rates. Right now, these corporations are making record profits and passing the cost of fixing all of their delayed maintenance onto taxpayers, onto ratepayers. It's just not fair. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Lippert-Garabedian, 90 seconds.
Well, I want to start out by completely agreeing with the other two candidates about how important childcare is. That is something that I've cared deeply about on city council and then as a state representative, including as one of only 10 moms in the state house out of 200 legislators who are raising kids while we serve. And so my voice at the table, I think, made something of a difference along with many other partners in thinking about a way that the state would continue to invest in this ecosystem when the federal funds ran out during the pandemic era. We've become the only state in the nation that has managed to maintain that level of historic funding, and that's thanks to the Fair Share Amendment, which I also supported. In addition to investing in our kids, which is always going to be a top priority for me, I think about things like investing in our mass transit system. The 5th Middlesex is so transit rich. We have 10 train stations, 14 bus lines, the Orange Line commuter rail. And when we invest in mass transit and give folks a different opportunity to, beyond paying for the gas that is through the roof, I just filled up my tank last night, oh my gosh, that is really important. That helps drive down overall costs for folks who are living here, makes the community more vibrant and engages us in civic activity and small business supports. I'd also want to hold up healthcare, which we may get to as well. I've been proud to support legislation to reduce or eliminate copays for a number of common prescription drugs, to also lean into supporting our community-based hospitals, including those that care for the folks right here in our district.
Thank you. Next question, and this is also a 90-second format. What do you think of the formula that determines how state aid, unrestricted general government aid, is dispersed to local communities? What changes in the structure of this formula would you propose? Councilor O'Malley.
Yeah, my understanding is unrestricted state aid doesn't have a formula that is followed, and it's completely at the whim of the legislature. I think that's unfair. We absolutely need a structure to explain how do various cities and towns get the funding based on their need. Right now, it's based on currying political favors with leadership. And because we don't have the access to their public records, we don't know what type of coercive behaviors are happening behind the scenes. But we do know that some state reps, et cetera, are being penalized because of their positions in the legislature. So we do need a formula that makes it fair in terms of how states and communities are getting state aid. But also Chapter 70 formula of our education just needs to be completely revamped from the bottom up. It's not meeting student need. It's not taking into consideration actual municipalities' ability to pay. So I do believe that we need to actually put good formulas that work for all communities. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Lippert-Garabedian, you have 90 seconds.
So in the 6 years that I've been in the State House, each year when I am able to go and advocate before leadership for what I want to see in the budgets, what are the most important pressing Commonwealth priorities, I always say we have to get money back down to our cities and towns. The state-local partnership is so important. It demonstrates to folks what I fundamentally believe, which is that democracy is here to work for you. You are electing people who have your best interests in mind and want to hear from you and support you. And I'm very proud that if you look at recent budgets, the number 2 bucket of funding that the state is sending out with our annual budgets is back to cities and towns. The first one is healthcare insurance, which I just mentioned, and that's largely non-discretionary funding. But it's so important. We have increased Chapter 90 funding, which is for local roads and bridges, by 50% in the time that I've been in the legislature, consistent with a formula. We have fully funded the Student Opportunity Act over its 7-year implementation period, despite a pandemic, despite it going more than $1 billion over what the state thought it needed to budget. And that is done by a formula that we are now going to reopen and revisit going forward, which is so important. That's really something I also press for, and I'm glad that we're revitalizing that. On unrestricted government aid, it's true there's not that level of intentional formula, but there's definitely, it's not willy-nilly. It's done based on sort of whatever the city or town got the year before, and it was sort of set in stone back when this first began. So I agree that we could be more dynamic with that, more thoughtful, and that's something that I would certainly press for as we move forward.
Thank you. Councilor McDonald, you have 90 seconds.
Thank you. This is Exhibit A for how Beacon Hill does not seem to understand the urgency of the local budget crisis that every community is facing. Almost every community will have done an override in the last year. Reading just put one on the ballot for next fall in this district. So unrestricted local aid is kind of like the sleeper leg on the three legs of primary income for cities and towns. Unrestricted local aid, Chapter 70 school funding, I really hope we'll talk about that, and then property taxes. So there is an opportunity here to create an actual formula that meets the goals that the state puts out for us. So I think, one, it needs to be equitable, and considerations I would look at is what is the commercial property tax base? That largely determines how much money you can raise. So if you're a community like Stoneham or Melrose that doesn't have a big commercial tax base, this is one way that the state can kind of help compensate for that. Obviously needs to be based on growth in areas where people have more people than they did decades ago when this was last revisited. The real value, like when you net out inflation of this, has gone down over time. That's a big part of the crunch, even though demands for services have gone up. And I think we could be using this formula to reward communities that are meeting the state's housing goals and addressing some of the costs that you incur when you do build more housing. So the opportunity there to have this be a win-win, to fund this based on tax on global corporations rather than local property taxes, is huge. And this is something I think is going to take years, but I would really dig into as a state senator.
Thank you. The next question is a yes/no question. Do you support ballot question 5 on the November ballot, which would impose greater limits on how much revenue the Commonwealth can collect and then return larger surplus amounts to taxpayers? Representative Lippert-Garabedian.
No.
Okay, Councilor McDonald.
Absolutely not.
And Councilor O'Malley.
Can you please repeat?
Sure.
What is the question?
Do you support ballot question 5 on the November ballot, which would impose greater limits on how much revenue the Commonwealth can collect and then return larger surplus amounts to taxpayers?
No.
Thank you. All right, next question, which is back to the 90-second format. How should the state legislature respond if voters pass question 5? And we're going to start with Councilor McDonald.
It's going to be really bad if it passes, because we're going to have to gut things from school funding to higher ed funding to Medicaid and funding. And all of these are places where we're getting pressure from the federal government as well, where the Trump administration is pulling back on grants and resources. So I think it's really important that we fight against this. I understand the costs of living are high. Massachusetts actually has a pretty flat tax structure. I also was very supportive of the Fair Share Amendment that put the millionaire's tax in place. I went out and knocked on doors for that. We need to have a fairer tax system, and this kind of blanket approach that instead sends money back without any question of where it's most needed, what are the urgent challenges that we face, where could we be backfilling places that the Trump administration has cut grants and withdrawn support, is completely the wrong approach. So if it passes, I think we're going to have a statewide conversation about what are some of our other options, certainly other revenue options that are not going to be as fair or helpful. And really have a hard look at where we're going to have to do those cuts. We went through this exercise in Malden just this year because we proposed an override. I worked hard to pass that override, but it failed. And we had to keep our promise to the voters, which is that we will have to eliminate positions. We eliminated 30, and that was only half the problem. So I think it would take years to come back from that, which is why it's really important for equity and opportunity and fairness that we fight to defeat that ballot amendment.
Thank you. Councilor O'Malley, 90 seconds.
Yeah, so I appreciate you restating the question. One of the challenges that we face in Massachusetts is that we have to legislate by ballot question. And one of the reasons being is because our legislature is one of the least active in the country, not actually passing legislation that improves our lives. I can think of many things that have gone to the ballot or were decided in the courts because of the lack of action at the State House. But they're also written in a way that can be complicated. And you might actually vote thinking you're voting one way, but it's actually having the opposite effect of what you actually want. So how we put ballot questions on the ballot and how clear they are so that people actually know what they're voting for, I think is really essential. If it was to pass and revenues were to go down, I believe that, right now, as I mentioned earlier, our state is relying way too much on property taxes, which are regressive. It's a flat tax. You pay it regardless of your ability to pay. We really need to explore progressive taxation, whether that be a wage tax or otherwise. But it's really the only fair way in which you actually raise revenue that is based on someone's ability to pay. There was the Fair Share Amendment, which is also known the millionaire's tax. That was us dipping our toe in the water when it comes to this. But I believe progressive taxation is the only way. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Lippert-Garabedian.
Could you repeat the question once more?
Sure.
Thank you.
How should the state legislature respond if voters pass ballot question 5?
Well, let's start by just acknowledging that the legislature has passed comprehensive tax relief legislation in recent memory. When I haven't been in the State House that long, I'd say I have an established record, but I'm certainly not establishment. And that bill that became a law included comprehensive relief for across different groups. So we had tax relief for working families, for older adults by doubling the circuit breaker program. The renter relief that I proposed was incorporated. And so let's say that this ballot initiative passes and it sort of expands what's called 62F. That is going to be incredibly problematic at a time when we are seeing a complete withdrawal from the federal government and the Trump regime of its responsibilities to also support what we care about here in Massachusetts. By the way, Massachusetts is one of those states that provides, we are net positive for the federal government. We send many more of our taxes down to DC than we receive back in state support or in federal support. And so imagining what's about to come down the pike with the One Big Beautiful Bill hitting right after the midterms, we're looking at up to $3.5 billion in losses to Mass Health alone to our state budget. We cannot make that up. So if this ballot initiative passes, which I certainly hope it will not, we're going to have to look for opportunities. We're going to have to cut. That's what we're going to have to start with. And that's not something that I want to be in the practice of doing when I know that we have to provide services and resources to the folks here in Massachusetts that depend on them and deserve to have them.
Thank you. The next question is a yes, no, 5 seconds. Do you believe the legislature should fully comply with the voters' decision in 2024 giving the state auditor authority to audit the legislature?
Who would you like?
Oh, I'm sorry, Councilor O'Malley.
Yes, definitely yes.
Representative Lipper Garabedian
Certainly within the confines of the Constitution.
and Councilor McDonald.
Yes.
Thank you. Now we have another yes/no question, and we will be starting with Representative Lipper Garabedian. Do you support ballot question 1, meant to apply comprehensive public records laws to the legislature and the governor's office? Yes, no.
Yes.
Councilor McDonald
Yes.
and Councilor O'Malley.
Yes, yes, yes.
All right. Now, the 90-second question. What specific changes would you make to how the legislature operates to make it more transparent and accountable to constituents? And we start with Councilor McDonald.
So this is important for democracy because you have to know what your leaders are doing in order to hold us accountable. Massachusetts is the only state in the country where we are not subject in our legislature and the governor's office to the same public records laws that exist for other forms of government. And that makes so many things hard. I talk to so many advocates who are fighting for their communities and they don't know what happened to their bill because the votes aren't recorded. They don't know what is happening behind closed doors. And so this is a really essential cornerstone piece for democracy. And so I would support access to public records. The ballot initiative has some basic safety protections. Absolutely. We do need to move forward with the voter-approved audit of the state legislature. Although if we had public records, this wouldn't be such a big deal because the records would already be available. I actually started my career in a different state, and I worked in a different state's legislature that was, in fact, subject to open meeting laws, public records, and, you know, the world continued to spin. We managed to make it happen. This is not a place where we want to be a leader in closed government. So I think that the voters are really clear about this, that we expect more from our legislative leaders to work this out, to find a way to move forward and respect the will of the 72% of voters who supported this, and I was certainly one of them. We've passed even local measures in Malden and Melrose, and I think Reading, all supporting the audit. So those things are basic transparency. It's essential for democracy, and I will absolutely support them. I signed the Every District Accountable Pledge on Act on Mass just to demonstrate that.
Thank you. Councilor O'Malley, 90 seconds.
Yes. So I'm going to start first with stipends. Right now, leadership uses stipends and committee assignments and leadership like that to coerce action of other legislators, and I think that's completely inappropriate. I would recommend we change the state ethics law to prohibit that type of coercive behavior. I'm not going to call it bribes, but it feels bribey. And I really think it needs to change. That is not how we want a state like Massachusetts to operate, where you get paid more if you go along with leadership. And if you have a different opinion, your district gets punished. I just think that's not how a state like Massachusetts should operate. Obviously, the public records law should apply to the legislature as well as the open meeting law. Every city and town in the Commonwealth has to comply with these laws. They're good governance laws. There are exemptions for private information, so that's a red herring. In Malden, we have a youth council, which is made up of children and young adults. And I believe if our children have to comply with the open meeting law and the public records laws, then our legislators should too. And the open meeting law just gives you the opportunity to attend meetings and see what's really going on. How is the sausage made? Right now, they choose when they let us into their meetings, and they choose what records they decide to release. We don't know how they're voting in committee, and sometimes they sponsor bills they don't support just so that people think they do, and then they vote against them, or they never let it come out of committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Lipper Garabedian, 90 seconds.
Thank you. Yes, I'm 100% supportive of transparency and auditing and making sure that government feels inclusive and welcoming to the folks who it's representing. I think that as both a city councilor and a state representative, I have raised the bar for what it takes to be engaged with your constituents, hearing from them and accessible to them. I write a monthly newsletter that tells you exactly how I voted on the issue so you can hold me accountable. I do monthly office hours so you can come visit with me and let me know how you're feeling. I respond personally to over 1,000 constituent emails every year to talk about where I stand on the things that they write in about. I am proud of the ways in which the legislature is moving in a direction that I think is so important to make sure people feel involved in the process. Our committee votes are now public, thanks to the champion of many of us to really push for that. We are allowing anybody to come and speak at committee hearings, whether in person or testifying virtually, which is so important to open up the building further. The legislature is audited every year. year. We have an audit that's posted online, and I am supporting making more records available to everyone. At the same time, I am the only candidate before you who has worked in all three branches of government. I have worked for a federal judge, I have worked for a Secretary of Education, and I am now one of your state representatives. And I believe fundamentally that the separation of powers is critically important for holding on to our democracy. Look what is happening in DC when Trump runs roughshod over Congress, ignores the will of the judges, and does whatever he wants. We need to have a functioning democracy. That means there is legislative strength alongside our executive branch and our judicial branch as well. I think that this issue around the audit has gotten very personal with the high-level folks. Let's get the conversation back to how we open up government more for everyone.
Thank you. The next question is a yes/no question. Do you support the use of mass surveillance technology, such as flock cameras, currently in use in some municipalities in Massachusetts? We start with Councilor O'Malley.
No.
Representative Lippert-Garabedian.
Absolutely no.
And Councilor McDonald.
I do not.
Okay, the next question, which now is 90-second question. Do you support a comprehensive data privacy bill prohibiting technology companies from selling consumer data? If so, should it include a provision to allow individual citizens, not just the Attorney General, to sue large tech companies? Representative Lippert-Garabedian, 90 seconds.
So I absolutely support comprehensive data privacy. It's actually one of the top things that I've worked on in the legislature, including as the champion of the Location Shield Act. The ACLU of Massachusetts asked me to lead on this issue, and it is part of the comprehensive data package that both the Senate and the House have now passed and is in conference. It would ensure that your location data when you move around in your daily lives cannot be collected and sold to a broker who can use it for whatever purposes they want, or to the federal government who is using it to spy on us and disappear folks right here in our community. The House bill that I supported also does include a private right of action. I think that's so important. You know, the rights that we care about here in Massachusetts can only be as good as if we keep up to date with the technology as it is expanding. We need to make sure that we are protecting our privacy and our security. I think about my kids growing up here, such a different environment from the kids that I used to teach. When I was a teacher, all the data was on paper and pencil and we put it away in a file. Now when Harrison and Oscar go to school and are on their tablets, they're creating a data footprint that is massive in scope. And do we have the right guardrails in place to make sure that it is only being used for their purposes, protecting their autonomy and their futures? I don't think we are yet. So I'm so proud to have been successful in getting the Location Shield Act through, to working on legislation to get cell phones out of schools, to making sure social media accounts for youth are addressing the real crisis that we see around young people's mental health well-being. So yes, 100% on the comprehensive data privacy and on the private right of action.
Thank you. Councilor McDonald.
Yeah, thank you. So on flock cameras, I helped start the Malden's Police Community Advisory Council, where we've been having conversations with our department about flock cameras, where the department is very supportive of them, but we have a lot of data and privacy concerns. And so I think that the importance of getting local conversation involved in this is huge, but I also think we need statewide standards for how we protect the kinds of surveillance that is used. I would support not using flock cameras at all in the state. If we're going to use them, we need to have limits on how much data can be kept, how long it can be kept, what you can do with it, when it can be accessed, and how that's cataloged so that it can be audited. The reality is that we are going up against the wealthiest corporations in the world for how they use our data. And because, you know, in this country, you don't own your data in the way that some other countries allow you to do. We are we're facing these companies who are increasingly trying to close the noose around us, our labor, our healthcare decision-making, everything that we do on a daily basis. So I absolutely support the right to sue these companies. There's just a landmark case in New Mexico where Facebook has to award hundreds of millions of dollars to kids for how they're misusing their technology. This is the only language that these companies will understand, is to make it more painful for them than what they are extracting from our communities in the way that they manipulate our data. So I will absolutely be fighting for our kids and our communities against that kind of data invasion from these big companies.
Thank you. Councilor O'Malley.
I think this is another example of if our legislature had been functioning over the last couple decades, we probably would have already had these protections in place. And this is not a criticism of any current legislators. And I appreciate the Location Shield Act and the fact that there has been recent improvements of this. But it's kind of a little bit like the horse is already out of the barn. They already have so much information on us. They already have so many databases with all of our data. They're selling it to each other. They're selling it to the government. They're selling it to insurance companies. I do think we need to pass something to protect our data. We should own it, not the companies spying on us. I think AI is also bringing up a lot of challenges because, if we thought, humans spying on us and companies spying on us was bad, now we have AI doing it around the clock. And I believe that AI needs to be opted in, particularly because of the data privacy issues. Right now, we're being automatically opted into all AI. They're scanning all of our emails, all of our messages. It's really not something that is great. And yes, I believe that there should be a private right of action against tech companies. Sometimes civil litigation is the only way to hold people accountable when you go for their pocketbook. So I do believe, in addition to the Attorney General, private action should be allowed. But again, like I said, legislation needs to be passed immediately. It should have been done decades ago.
Thank you. Next question. What action do you favor to respond to expected disruptions in services related to cuts in federal funding to programs such as Medicaid, SNAP benefits, and Head Start? Feel free to share your views about just one of those programs, or all three if you would like. Councilor McDonald.
Yeah, thank you. So this is one of the ways in which the Trump administration is using its political agenda to try to literally endanger the lives of our neighbors. And we have to fight back in all of the ways that we can and get creative about this because it's going to be years more of this. Massachusetts is in the crosshairs. So the threats to reduce some of these programs that are authorized by Congress are some of the hard, those can have some of the worst impacts. I have certainly supported going to court to defend these programs and these rights, and we've had some success with that, and we need to continue to do that. But I also want to say that when we have the federal government withdrawing money, we need to be prepared to buffer that with some of the reserves that we have at the state. We can't forever support federal money that's been withdrawn. It's too much. But I know so many folks who have lost their jobs, folks who have lost coverage because of decisions the Trump administration has made. And Massachusetts has a pretty good rainy day fund, and there are places where we can and should be buffering that to protect our people. My sincere hope is that this is a once-in-a-lifetime need to fight back in this way. I also think that when it comes to Medicaid specifically, the solution forward is actually a single-payer Medicare for all kind of system. Now, I support that. I think it's the only way to push back on the hospital conglomerates and the insurance companies that right now make our lives very, very difficult. I'm married to a hospital case manager, so I think that's the longer term that we need to push for.
Thank you. Councilor O'Malley.
Thank you. So when I was a student attorney at BC, I was part of a housing justice clinic. And in that clinic, I not only helped people stay in their homes, but I also helped them get the services that they needed to help bring their costs down so that they were more likely to stay in their homes. So, helping them get SNAP, helping them get fuel assistance. These are like safety nets so that people can remain in their homes and not become, homeless, so that people can be fed and not be hungry at school or hungry at work. I think these are just a social safety net of what is expected of society. And the fact that, some members or some parts of our government are turning backs on the most needy, I think is a tragedy. In terms of what we would do as a state, I believe we need to really be investing in community organizations like the Bread of Life in Malden. They provide both housing and food for residents. They just built a new facility that's beautiful. It's on our bike path. So I would support, increasing funding locally to make sure that we have that safety net and we're not overly dependent on the federal government to provide this. In terms of healthcare, I do believe there is something to be said for having a public option to compete with private insurance companies to help bring costs down. That's what happens with Medicare for seniors, et cetera. And I think having that available for everyone so you can keep your private health insurance but also have the public option, I think is a great way to do that.
Thank you. Representative Lippert-Garabedian.
This is one of those doom and gloom questions where it's so, in the face of what is this onslaught of cruelty and chaos from the Trump administration, it can just feel overwhelming. And at the same time, there's no state I would rather live in right now than Massachusetts, because I see that we push back and are a beacon of hope around the nation for a different vision of what it means to be American, what our future should be like, and what we want to invest in, which is our people. So there are things certainly at the state level that we can do and that we're looking into doing. You know, I hosted a community conversation just in the last year around the One Big Beautiful Bill and its specific impacts on mass health cuts and food benefits, and talked with experts about what we have at our disposal as a state legislature. To Councilor McDonald's point, like, we absolutely need to look at the rainy day fund. It's here for this reason. This is a stormy day. And so we need to be looking at that as a place that we can go. The Fair Share Amendment has enabled us to invest in our kids. We have universal school meals now for all students, including mine, but yours as well. We recognize that food security is a non-negotiable, and we'll look for ways in which we can use our state resources to you know, issues like that. For the mass health coverage, we have such incredible health leaders. Many of my colleagues in the State House, this is their wheelhouse. We are looking for every opportunity to seek flexibility in the way that we can deploy the federal funds we are receiving and then backfill them with state funds. But there's just no way, when we have to balance our budget at the state, just like I have to balance my budget at home, and the federal government can run a deficit year over year, we're not going to be able to backfill all of those cuts. So it's going to take all of us doing what we can.
Thank you. The next question, which is a 90-second question, is what specific state-level action or actions do you favor to respond to changes at the national or international level that impact our lives and communities here in the Commonwealth? And we start with Councilor O'Malley.
What state-level policy would I propose to address changes in the national and international situation?
Yes.
Oh, that's a great question. So I think that we really need to be thinking about how do we grow our local economy, particularly in the Boston area and New England, to make sure that we can weather international economic storms or national economic storms. Boston has always been known to be very resilient when it comes to recessions because of the fact that we have education here. So I believe that we have to really dive into that, encouraging startups, encouraging business creation. We have Kendall Square. I believe that this is how we grow our economy and help protect our residents from those national and international headwinds. We are a very productive state, and I think that is what gives us protection from some of the worst atrocities that the federal government has been doling out. It allows us to provide a social safety net when our economy is strong and we're generating money and we're generating taxes that we can spend locally to make sure that we have a very resilient economy. Education, funding in education, so that we have students that become workers that can actually work in the tech companies in our communities. That is how I would make sure that we pass local legislation to weather some of the storms at the national and international levels. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Lippert-Garabedian.
Margaret, could you repeat the question once more?
Yes. What specific state-level action or actions do you favor to respond to changes at the national or international level that impact our lives and communities here in the Commonwealth?
Well, one that comes to mind right away is what's going on at both the national and international level around instability and immigration. And it is, a crime in some ways that Congress has not seen fit to reform our immigration laws over decades, almost as long as I've been alive. And it has created chaos across the nation. And what we are seeing now with a dystopian, cruel, chaotic administration is that they are coming into our communities and ripping away people from Malden, from Wakefield, from all over this district, and disappearing them across the nation in completely inhumane ways. These are people who have lived here for decades. They have been contributing. They have families. And so, we do not need to have that kind of instability and chaos in our communities. So I was very proud to support the PROTECT Act recently that the governor signed into law just this week to say that our public safety officials should be expending our local and state resources on keeping our communities safe, not being pulled into civil immigration enforcement by ICE agents. That when rogue ICE agents are hurting folks in our community and sometimes killing them, they should be able to be held accountable for that type of action. That when our kids go to school in our public schools, to their child care facilities, to get health care, to be in a courthouse, to see public safety carried out, ICE agents should not be able to enter to enforce a civil immigration warrant. So these are things that I am so proud to have supported at the state level. We are not going to be able to solve the geopolitical issues of the day at the state level, but we can stand firm on what it means to be here in Massachusetts and a right to constitutional due process.
Thank you. Councilor McDonald.
Well, why don't we start by canceling the state's contract with ICE? It's called a 287G agreement. Massachusetts is the only blue state that has one. Most states canceled them in the first Trump administration. This contract that uses state resources to deport people from Massachusetts is a perfect example of where we could be fighting harder, but we are pulling punches. And that's, the PROTECT Act, I'm very glad it passed. It includes some important reforms that, frankly, I don't know why we couldn't have passed earlier. It was introduced in January, and between then and now, hundreds of people have been deported from our state. It frankly could have been passed years ago when it was proposed in a stronger version as the Safe Communities Act. These are places where I witness every single day the pain in our community that is immigrant heavy in Malden, but it is not just Malden. Okay, I've watched deportations happen on my street. I have donated to families who have had their loved ones ripped away. We organized a rally on City Hall Plaza to try to get somebody out of detention because that's what every resident of our community deserves, but we can't do that for everyone. So we have to fight to make sure that not a dime of our tax dollars is being used to support ICE in Massachusetts. That should be a no-brainer to me. And we have to support the immigrant-led community organizations, which are in all of our communities, which is what I do on my spare time in addition to being a city councilor. That's how we show up for our neighbors, and we need to do a lot more. Our neighbors need to feel that they have people in the legislature who are fighting for them every single day, including in the rooms that they are not in.
Thank you. Next question is a yes/no question. Do you support congestion pricing on some roads to raise money for public transportation? Representative Lipper Garabedian.
Tentatively, yes.
Councilor McDonald.
Yeah, open to it, yes.
And Councilor O'Malley.
No.
Okay. Next question is a 90-second format one. What next steps would you take to improve public transportation service and accessibility in Massachusetts, and how would you pay for them? Councilor McDonald.
I'm really sorry. Could you just
Sure.
repeat the question one more time?
Yeah. What next steps would you take to improve public transportation service and accessibility in Massachusetts, and how would you pay for them?
Yeah, thank you. So I want to recognize that the T has gotten a lot better from the days when the Orange Line couldn't even go 10 miles an hour downtown. That is good. That is an example of where we have caught up on some of the disinvestment that has been there for generations, and we're doing better. We got to keep it up. We cannot let our foot off, I guess not the gas, but the accelerator or the electricity that the T uses. So the value here of the Fair Share Amendment is really clear because that's given us money to pick up that capital investment and make sure that we continue to do that. So just a better functioning system makes a huge difference. A couple other things I'd really like to see. One is that I want to see expanded bus service, especially in some of our suburban areas, places where we're trying to build more housing. We're trying to do our part, and we really need those bus services, especially late hours for folks who are working late in different communities. And I want to be able to expand the fare-free bus pilots that have started in Boston. They've been really successful. They actually make it quicker because the bus doesn't have to collect the fares in the same way, and it makes it more attractive and viable. We saw with the World Cup that actually the T can redo stations in 10 months rather than 10 years in Foxborough when they are so motivated. And so I think that's the kind of service I really want to see. And I think that kind of urgency, because we're not going to get it from the Trump administration and we're not going to get the help from the federal government that we have in the past, is really essential for making our communities livable and affordable. And I think that congestion pricing is not the first place I would go, but I think it's an important piece to consider in the whole package of changes.
Thank you. Councilor O'Malley?
Thank you for this. Yeah, I love public transit. I'm a daily transit rider. I'm a multimodal person. I have a car. I have a bike. I take the train. I take buses. I have a kayak. There are ways to get around. It's not just all about automobiles. But I think we have to understand that right now, in the state of our public transit system, people are driving because it's the only option they really have. So rather than using the stick of congestion pricing, I think that we should be using the carrot of improving our public transit system. I hope that helps provide some context of where my position is on the last question. Ways that we can do that, obviously we have to improve the MBTA generally. I think there's been a lot of progress with General Manager Eng, and I applaud the work that he has done and Governor Healy when it comes to this. I've seen the changes from when I used to ride it and the orange line was catching on fire and people were jumping in the Mystic River to what it is now. It's a million times better. It beeps a lot. It kind of feels like you're in an emergency room. But aside from that, it's really a great experience. In terms of like the greater district, we have to understand that buses are serving. We need to improve our bus routes, make them more frequency, but also our commuter rails. So what I've heard out campaigning, particularly in Reading, is that it would be great if we could electrify our commuter rail engines and make sure that all of our tracks are double track and not single track, so you can have more frequency coming in and out. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Lipper-Garabedian.
Yeah, I mean, again, the 5th Middlesex District is just where sort of transportation is, we're a perfect poster child for how important mass transit is. As I mentioned before, there are 10 train stations here, 2 that are Orange Line, and the rest all include commuter rail. We have 2 different commuter rails in the 5th Middlesex and 14 bus lines. And, you know, I've gone out on the campaign trail and met with folks at all of those train stations in the morning just to talk about what they care about and what they're eager to see moving forward. As a state representative, I've been really proud to push back on some of the initial proposed cuts to service that were considered during the pandemic. We've successfully fought against closing a station. We made sure that there was complete bus connectivity within Wakefield, which had been at risk. We've also looked for opportunities to increase accessibility for those who are mobility impaired. So we're getting a mini high platform at one of the Melrose stations right now as we're going, and I'm going to look for opportunities to do that across the district as we continue. I know how important it is for folks to be able to use the train, the bus, whether they're daily commuters or the occasional rider. It drives down costs. One other thing we've been able to do with the Fair Share Amendment is the low income rate, which has been hugely successful for folks who are living, you know, at a tighter margin. We want to make sure that they can access and get to the places they need to go. I'll also be continuing to push on the MBTA on its better bus redesign to make sure there's more regional connectivity. Really excited that a number of the communities are working on microtransit grants now that I've helped support and their applications. So this is, you know, we've got a lot of leaders here and we're going to keep leading on this issue.
Thank you. This will now be the last question before we go on to closing statements, and this is a 90-second question. What would you do to maintain and advance the Commonwealth's leadership and innovation in fields of education, technology, and scientific and biomedical research? And we'll start with Councillor O'Malley.
Yeah, I think that generally we need to be increasing education funding. We talked about progressive taxation versus regressive property taxes. So investing in our public schools is essential. I believe that also revamping our vocational education. A lot of these jobs you can approach from either the traditional public school or the vocational route. When it comes to manufacturing and robotics, this is a perfect way for us to lead in the nation when it comes to vocational education. I think that job training is also essential. You don't necessarily learn how to do the job in a classroom. You learn it from being on the job and having that real life experience. That's how lawyers, that's how doctors work. And I think it's essential to give kids that experience so that they have really great opportunities to learn and maybe develop a career. So education funding for me is the foundation of my campaign, and it's the foundation of this question too. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Lipper-Garabedian.
I'm sorry I keep asking this, but
No, that's perfectly fine. Yeah. What would you do to maintain and advance the Commonwealth's leadership and innovation in fields of education, technology, and scientific and biomedical research?
Great. I mean, when you were asking this question, I do think about, my own sons and sort of what kind of economy and world they're growing up in and what will be available to them and how we best prepared them. And as a mom and as a former teacher, education always comes, of course, front of mind. I worked really closely on a bill called the College and High School Bill that's supported by the Early College Alliance, by Latinos for Education, a good number of education groups that really identifies exactly what Councillor O'Malley was saying. We need on-ramps for all of our kids as we're preparing them for a 21st century economy. economy by giving them access to job training, to higher education credit immediately. And Malden High School actually has an early college program, which is fantastic. So continuing to lean in on that will be a top priority for me. I'm also the House chair of a caucus that I started called the Emerging Technology Caucus, because I do recognize that we are an innovation economy. That is what drives Massachusetts. We have a highly educated population, and we need to lean in on those industries like higher education, emerging tech, life sciences, where we are an international leader. And at the same time, as legislators, we have to be mindful of those guardrails we talked about earlier. We want to encourage innovation, we want to encourage industry, but we also have to stand firm on what we care about, like working families, organized labor, access to the all the civil rights and liberties that we depend on when it comes to avoiding a surveillance state. So these are things that I think about a lot and will continue to lead on as a state senator.
Thank you. Councilor McDonald.
I think there's a lot that we can do to support innovation at multiple levels. And when we talk about innovation, we often think like big companies like Kendall Square that are getting big research grants. And again, as I said, I think places where those grants are being withdrawn for political reasons by the Trump administration, we got to look at backfilling that, like funding those and bridging the gap. But I also want to emphasize the amazing innovation that happens in just our small businesses that are the fabric of our everyday lives in our communities. As a city councilor, I worked with our Chamber of Commerce to create an outreach program to like minority and immigrant-owned businesses. And I think that is there's so much more we can do in that area. I would love to see what they're called, incubators that help businesses start. There's been a green tech incubator in Somerville that has been really important in the last generation. Those are the kinds of places where you're literally creating the ecosystem for innovation to happen, and we could be doing it more with food businesses and cultural businesses. And one particular thing I think we can't underestimate is how much the cost of living makes it hard to innovate. Like, it just raises the risk. So that's a housing issue and trying to find workforce level housing, but it's also a healthcare issue. And what if we expanded our health insurance coverage and started towards Medicare for all by offering that to innovators? It says, we'll give you health insurance as part of a state program. You can buy into it really easily, and that will remove one of the big problems for small businesses and innovators just starting out. So creative approaches like that.
Thank you. We will now ask the candidates for their closing statements. You will speak in reverse order from the opening statements, and you have 2 minutes each. So we'll start with Representative Lippert-Garabedian. 2 minutes.
Sure. Well, thank you to the League of Women Voters of Winchester, the League of Women Voters of Melrose, to the town of Stoneham for hosting us in this space. I've really appreciated the dialogue and the questions today, and I want to also note that I have appreciated running really positive campaigns with the other two candidates here tonight. And so, I think you've had an opportunity to sort of hear from me about why I'm running. Again, I believe I do have the right values, the right experience, and a track record of success, both as a city councilor and as a state representative, to continue to deliver for you from day one in state senate. And the stakes are high given what we're facing in terms of federal headwinds, as well as the really clear need that we have to continue to drive at greater affordability and a more inclusive environment for all the folks who live here and call Massachusetts home. No one on the stage will fight harder for you as your state senator and has this track record of success to date that I have. And I will continue to deliver results for you and your families as the next state senator for the 5th Middlesex. You can learn more about my campaign at kateforsenate.org, and I do ask for your support and your vote on September 1st.
Thank you. Councilor O'Malley.
Thank you again. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here today and all of the organizers for putting this on. I do want to briefly return to one of the earlier questions where I might have missed the mark. When it comes to immigration, I have been a fierce defender of immigrants. Obviously, we're all pretty much descended from immigrants, particularly in this area, Irish and Italian here, and it's essential. And I've been defending immigrants in front of the camera, but also behind the scenes. And I do believe that it's really important that we don't tokenize our immigrant community, and that we actually show up each and every day and make sure that we're doing what is best for them. My campaign is about bringing common sense to Beacon Hill. I mentioned it earlier, it's about reforming education funding so that we actually educate our students and we don't allow zip codes to become barometers of where kids will be able to go with their lives. Government accountability, as I mentioned, it cannot just be about holding Trump accountable. It actually has to be about holding everyone accountable at the state as well as local level. I'm not expecting everyone to be perfect, but we have to at least try. protecting public assets. As I mentioned earlier, I'm a former park ranger in the Fells and Breakheart. I've been protecting public assets for decades. I will continue to do so, even when it comes at great personal cost for me. And lastly, affordability. We have the tools and the levers to make our communities more affordable. Building affordable housing, reducing utility rates with the Department of Public Utilities. We need to use the levers. We need to be bold in this moment. O'MalleySenate.com. I would love an opportunity to earn your vote on September 1st. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor McDonald.
I want to briefly touch on an issue we didn't talk much, which is school funding. And the schools are the most expensive thing that every city and town does, and that's why it's so important for our future. It's the center of so much life. I have worked in school funding professionally. I'm the only candidate in this race. I proposed changes over years to the state school funding formula, the Chapter 70 formula. I've testified before the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. I have a specific plan about how to change that formula to help it keep up with inflation, to make it fair for all of our communities, and to make sure that our kids are consistently getting the resources that they need. So I just wanted to share that, and I'd be happy to talk at length with anyone who wants to talk more about school funding. Be careful what you wish for. For my closing statement, I want to really recognize how much is at stake in our communities as we hear about the attacks of the Trump administration, where I am committed to fighting in all the ways that we can, creative ways, to make sure that we're protecting our rights and our people and LGBTQ folks like myself and our immigrant neighbors. We certainly have to and can make life more affordable for working people and families. I've been really proud to be endorsed by unions in this race, including human services workers, teachers, firefighters, grocery store workers, building maintenance workers. And we have to make sure that we are funding our local communities. As I've shared, there's a lot of ways to do that, but this crisis has to have urgency in response from Beacon Hill. So I am proud to have the support of the most progressive organizations in this race. That includes the endorsement of Progressive Massachusetts, Progressive Mass, the Working Families Party, the Chinese Progressive Political Association, 350 Mast Action, Climate Activists, and Clean Water Action. I am also very proud to have the endorsement of Malden Mayor Gary Christensen and my colleagues who know that I know how to both collaborate with them and get stuff done and push for our values. So I ask for your vote on September 1st, CarrieMcDonald.com. That's Carrie like Mariah and McDonald like hamburgers, one word. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you for participating in this forum. And now, Lynn?
Well, thank you, candidates, for showing commitment to our communities by running for public office and for participating in our candidate forum. And thank you to Margaret for ably moderating this candidate forum. This forum can be viewed on Stoneham TV and other public platforms as it is shared. And thank you to members of the public who sent us your suggestions for debate questions, and to Stoneham TV and the Town Hall for working with us, and also the local news outlets for helping with coverage, and our league volunteers who also helped to plan this and liaise with the media, and mostly to the voters. Thank you for exercising your right to vote and to have your voice heard. The deadline to register to vote is Saturday, August 22nd. The deadline to apply for a vote by mail ballot is Tuesday, August 25th at 5 p.m. Early voting in person will be open August 22nd through August 26th. Check with your city or town website about the location and other specific information. Primary election day will be Tuesday, September 1st from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. in all districts. Thank you.